Hello and welcome to Frank's School. This is the last day of class vocabulary. With this day, we'll have it'll be 4 days of collecting words. Let's see something. Plums was right. It was Latin. Okay, and I'll say a few other things here in a little bit. There are the words that we have so far. We should have 9 of them. Well, no, I put the ones from today. All right, I still have, went into my students' notes that I still have, and I call who's got a word. And it's sleek. I'm not going to run through this whole process because I think it could just so quickly be getting old for you. Now, it's a very live experience in class. It's very different that way. As you know, I go through that process. Is it spelled right? But you've heard it enough now. Here's the context, an ellipsis. I got this from Angie Brambley, clear back in '89. I put the quotes, footnote, it's pronounced right. Anybody know what it means? They might. And I write, go back to Angie, having a smooth, well-groomed look, slick. The etymology, it turns out it actually comes from slick. It was a variant of slick. This is the older word. And slick comes from Old High German. After a while, I just called it Old English because Old English and Old High German were so close. So in Old High German, there's a similar word. Thanks, Angie. Then I go on to another student who's got a word. Brianna Turner, now this was just the last year I taught. Striated, spelled it right, where's the stress? Striated, it's right there, striated. The striated layers of rock, and I go through the process. Part of speech, a sleek finish. This is an adjective. Striated, striated layers, looks like an adjective. It's got an ed on the end of it. Verb, well, it's a verb acting as an adjective. And in a case like that, this is what I do to instead of teaching the grammar all over again. And what's it means? Marked with small grooves or channels. And the etymology was from Latin. The word, I think, stria in Latin, which meant ditch or channel or groove. So this was Old High German or Old English. This was Latin. This was from, there's the footnote, Brianna Turner. And then one more word to fill them out for the week. Crucifix. Spelled right? Yep. Stress, where's the stress? And remember, I don't supply this. I always ask to see if anybody already knows. So kids can show off the knowledge that they already have. And some students at that age are dazzling with their vocabulary, and others are just amazed. How do you know that stuff? Crucifix, there's the stress. Part of speech, upon the crucifix. Well, it's the object of a preposition. It must be something. It's a noun. Always checking. This is Cortland Rush now. This would be the third, and there's my footnote. Cortland Rush supplied that. An interesting student. The best mechanic of his age that I ever knew. At his age, that's how good a mechanic he was. He's also, in my whole life, I've only known 3 people named Cortland. My father, my great nephew, and Cortland Rush. Anyway, that she wore. And what is it? And I'd get guesses. It's a cross with a figure of Jesus. And the etymology, it comes from Latin. Interestingly enough, if you go back enough, it's the Latin word for attach or fasten. Now, I would get a sentence for each word, and then I would put the 2 together and put all 3 in one. But I wanted to take time to say something. Instead of doing that today, when I learned this from Doc Blanchard, it wasn't the same. I adjusted this, and I continually adjusted it over 30 years of using this. I continually adjusted it. Doc Blanchard never had us put 2 of the words into one sentence. We always wrote word by word, And one of the reasons I started to do that was because I'm a slow reader, and it made it so much easier to correct if I would read one sentence for 3 words or more. And another thing, it got the students to write sentences beyond what they would normally write. Instead of getting simple, just a simple single clause sentence, they began to write compound sentences and complex sentences and compound complex sentences. It got much more interesting. I think he might have had us do that. I'm not sure. I don't believe he ever made us give the etymology. I'm not sure about that. But he did say etymology is the frosting on the vocabulary cake. He was the one that got me to discover how much fun etymology is. Oh, and there was something else. Oh, I know, the documentation. I don't think he made us do that either. The documentation of the source. And one of the things I wanted to say about that is a story I've been suggesting I would tell you. When I decided I would start making the students document their sources was when a student, I remember particularly some student offered the word vert, V-E-R-T, vert. And I didn't know the word. Usually I know these words. I didn't know that word. And he gave the context and went through all this process. Well, he was being ornery. And what he was doing was he was taking a slang word for pervert and putting it on the board, and the other students were kind of giggling. And it took a while before I figured out what was going on. I was so trusting that my students would bring real, genuine words, and I was puzzled. You know, I think I said, "Where did you see this word?" "Oh, I heard somebody say it." Let's look it up, you know, and I couldn't find it in the dictionary. Eventually I figured it out. Then I thought, okay, from now on, kids are going to have to be ready to show me where they got the word so that would not happen again. Related to that, Doc Blanchard, word got around back when I was a kid that a student, we thought this was so funny, a student in another class had offered the word Peloponnese. Peloponnese. And Doc Blanchard didn't know the word. He said, Peloponnese, what do you mean? I looked it up. And he said, you know, it's those things you ride on and you swing that hammer and you hammer a ball on the ground. The word was polo ponies, but he gave it as Peloponnese, and we thought that was so funny. Of course, Doc Blanchard was quite a character in that time. And I guess one other thing I would tell you here, I did last year, why no bigger than 3 syllables? Well, I did that partly because I'm prejudiced in language. I don't like big words. But also, otherwise, students would tend to simply bring big words. They would think, well, if it's a big word, I don't know it. And I would just be working with really big, less interesting to me words. And the etymology so often would have simply been Latin every time because of these big words. So I liked words like this, and I told kids the same. All right, and then finally, one other thing. I've had kids be pretty ornery different times in school, or sometimes kids would be too lazy to offer words or bring words. I'd go to a class and nobody would have a word. Well, in a case like that, sometimes I said, all right, there's the words from last class period. Find the stuff out yourself. I wouldn't put any of this up there. I would say, okay, there are your words. I'll pass out dictionaries, and it'll just be quiet in here for 10 minutes, and you find them out and be sure you're ready to use them tomorrow. And that pretty much took the fun out of it, because this vocabulary work was fun. Kids liked doing it, but of course they didn't like homework or doing work outside of class. They didn't like to come prepared. So sometimes, it didn't happen very often, but sometimes I would actually have to do that. I say, okay, if you don't want to do it the fun way, here are your words. And it becomes rather like a normal vocabulary work. And not all bad, just not nearly so fun, not the oral experience that this was. All right, tomorrow, the next class, it'll actually, I guess, be Monday maybe. But the next class, what you have to do, there are 12 words. You don't have to study them all. This is one of those things I learned to do. That word, no, you don't have to study it. You'll probably never run into it again. I don't like this word too much, so you don't need to use that one. Study that one, and you don't need to study that one. All right, now you've got 9 words. I'm not going to give them all to you tomorrow, but I may only give you 8. But you don't have to study those. But those 10 words, 9 words, those 9 words, make sure you can spell them correctly tomorrow. You don't have to tell me what part of speech they are, but make sure you can put them in a sentence that proves to me that you know what the word means. If you can do those 2 things, you ought to be all right for tomorrow's test. And in the next class, I'll show you then how that would go. See you then.